Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jake Bennett. I've lived in Phoenix since 2011. I serve as Director of Policy and Government Affairs, Legislative Affairs for the Israeli-American Coalition for Action. That's the government affairs sister organization to the Israeli-American Council, IAC, which serves Israeli Americans throughout the country, of whom there are about 800,000, over 10% of America's Jews. So, thank you for holding this. I was very disappointed to see that the other side chose not to come, or made a statement by not coming, because I think these are topics that all of us need to hear and all of us need to discuss. When it comes to Arizona's public universities and also K-12 education, we have an obligation to balance freedom of speech with the public safety and civil rights needs that go with enforcing existing anti-terror and non-discrimination state and federal statutes. The crisis of radicalism and anti-Semitism that we first saw on college campuses has now bled down into high schools and middle schools. This radicalism expresses itself as hatred and intolerance towards Jews, as well as towards America, American history, and democracy generally.
Hold on just a minute there. I thought they were just expressing their views, according to ASU faculty.
Hatred is also a view.
Okay.
Radicalism is also a view. We saw this recently with the surge in TikTok videos expressing support for Osama bin Laden's letter to America and the 9/11 attacks on America. Though this trend was reportedly started by a Hamas supporter, it spread like wildfire through many sectors of American life and was reported on in mainstream news. A recent poll shockingly revealed that 51% of Americans aged 18 to 24 considered the atrocities committed by the terror group Hamas and its allies against Israel on October 7th to be justified. On many college campuses in America, among some students, support for Hamas is given either explicitly or implicitly, and October 7th is called legitimate resistance. I'll just pull up here and share with you as I sat here and I scrolled to see what was on the social media of ASU's SJP. This was October 10th. You can't see it so well. I'll email it to the chairman to share with you. It says SJP at ASU mobilizes for Day of Resistance, in all caps, Rally for Palestine. And Day of Resistance here is referring to October 7th. That's a picture of the breached fence of Gaza with terrorists standing on top of an Israeli tank waving a flag. For the record, October 7th included mass murder, mass gang rape, mass kidnapping, killing children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children, burning and decapitating babies, and a myriad of other horrors too graphic and too widespread to deal with here. The ADL recorded a nearly 400% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in October compared to the same month last year. On October 31st, FBI Director Christopher Wray testified in Congress that anti-Semitic threats in this country are at, quote, historic levels, in part because the Jewish community is targeted by terrorists really across the spectrum, end quote. He also went on to say American Jews represent only 2.4% of the population, but account for 60% of all religious faith category hate crimes. Jewish students face increasingly hostile environments on school and college campuses. So how can we address this crisis? By enforcing the law. Number one, anti-terrorism statutes can be employed to immediately defund and deactivate student organizations providing material support to any designated terrorist organization. Two, the Immigration and Nationality Act. Any foreign alien, including those on student and temporary visas who espouse or endorse terrorist activity, are subject to arrest and could be handed over to federal authorities for deportation proceedings. Number three, it's the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, according to which all university, college, and public school system administrators are obligated to provide a hostile-free learning environment to their students. Pursuant to the U.S. Supreme Court precedent of Tinker v. Des Moines Independent Community School District, those administrators can and should ban potentially disruptive events that can be reasonably forecasted to violate the rights of other students, including the right to a hostile-free environment. Therefore, accordingly, the state can and should withhold all state funding from any university, college, or public school system that does not act to protect its Jewish students from hostile environments motivated by anti-Semitism. Now, what do these student groups have to do with anti-Semitism and or terrorism? Certain student groups have long documented ties and I'll share after this links to reports on these ties to the chairman to share with the committee, to various Islamist and Palestinian terror organizations. These groups regularly harass and intimidate Israel-friendly students on campuses across the United States. You're going to hear some testimony about that from the person following me, which I just heard in the hallway for the first time. For example, in October, the ADL recorded 109 Students for Justice in Palestine organized rallies that exhibited explicit or strongly implicit support for Hamas and or violence against Jews, creating hostile environments and threats of violence targeting Jewish students. At these hate rallies, students regularly chanted slogans calling for the ethnic cleansing of Jews from the entirety of Israel. They say from the river, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That's what they mean when they say from the river to the sea. They've also called for anti-Semitic terror attacks, intifada, as it's known in Arabic and as it's known among the pro-Palestinian crowd. They've been using a slogan with a particularly strong echo to Nazi Germany's final solution. The chant is, quote, "There is only one solution, intifada, revolution." So violent terrorist hate crimes against Jews. This is being called for on our college campuses and even on high school and some middle school campuses as well. They've also called for discrimination against Jews at their school with the slogan, "Zionists are not welcome here." Zionist is code for Jews. In Germany, in the 1930s, you used to see those signs in the shop windows. Jews are not welcome here. So as with the BDS anti-Israel boycott, this anti-Israel movement, they follow the playbook of Nazi Germany. Since October 7th, there have been numerous documented cases of assault, battery, harassment, stalking, terroristic threats, and other violations of the law on campuses across the country. Attorneys general from 20 states called for the investigation and prosecution of anti-Semitic incitement and support for terror by SJP. I'll share that letter as well. Finally, let us clarify one very important point. Anti-discrimination laws do not violate free speech rights. Anti-discrimination laws don't violate any First Amendment right. They exercise the state's freedom to set public policy, an expression of the values of its citizens to provide for fair treatment and freedom from discrimination and hostile environments for all residents. These laws do not penalize, infringe, or in any way regulate an individual's right to free expression. Free expression ends when you're breaking the law. Let me conclude by saying that our laws are, of course, always meant to be enforced. In a time of crisis such as this, however, with such wanton disregard for Jewish people's civil rights, such blatant expressions of anti-Semitic hatred, with public calls for anti-Semitic discrimination, and a collapse in public morality, there's never been a more compelling case for reaffirming our commitment to standing up against terrorism and bigotry, and for calling for the strict enforcement of state and federal statutes that defend the very fabric of American society. Thank you.
Any questions for Jake? Yeah, we see it, and we're with you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jake.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Jake, real quick. So specifically at ASU, have students reached, Jewish students or any students reached out to you voicing their concerns?
Typically, when they contact IAC, they're going to another department. I've been hearing it secondhand, and yes, I've seen it. I've heard it from students, from the local rabbi at ASU as well, who was at this recent student government meeting that was disrupted with the pelting of rocks at the windows and at the building where they were holding it, and I just heard an example out in the corridor from the young man who's going to present next.
And just to add to that, the reason I asked is
please,
I did meet with some Jewish students, and they are very, very concerned for their safety.
Yeah, I would add, Mr. Chairman, if I heard, I think if anyone in this room heard these same stories of harassment and intimidation and threats of violence directed at any other group aside from Jews, the outroar would be deafening.
Yeah.
If it were against African Americans, Native Americans, LGBTQ, what have you, and they're threatening violence and lynching and whatnot, we wouldn't hear this silence that we hear right now.
Well, I kind of disagree with that, with you, Jake. I think there is an outrage and uproar from from most Americans, The problem is the media is probably on the side of the pro-Hamas crowd. The faculty, most of the faculty would be on the side of the pro-Hamas crowd. And so the people that have the loudest voice, but I think the average person out there, because I also met with several rabbis in the past couple days, and they are concerned. I'm asking them, are you arming your synagogues? They're like, yes, and some of them can't afford to, but I was at a Jewish school about 2 weeks ago, pulling up into the parking lot. There's 3 guys with, AR-15s. I'm like, sweet, I like this. Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
But it's sad that they gotta do that. So I think the average American out there is with you. I know the country basically as a whole is with you. It's just these pro-Hamas terrorist groups have the loudest voice, and the media is with them. So that's just my take. But we're with you, and we know that
Thank
you're
you.
strong.
Can I have one
Yeah.
point? I had a very positive experience about a week ago, actually. We sent a letter pointing to the Title VI requirements, obligations, the moral and legal duties of a school to administrators of a high school in Seattle, Washington. Actually, we sent it to a few schools in Seattle where they had these organized rallies, these disruptive walkout for ceasefire, walkout for Hamas. And one of the schools responded, we wanted to do something. We didn't know we could. We thought our hands were tied. Thank you for pointing out the Title VI obligations. Thank you for pointing out the Supreme Court case of Tinker, which tells us that we can block a disruption that is going to, A, disrupt class. Number one, on that grounds alone, we can block it. And number two, going to create a hostile environment for our Jewish students. And so the administrators went to the organizers of the rally ahead of time and said, there's a line here.
Yep.
And if you and don't cross this line. And the kids had prepared all their signage the day before. And the ones that said that Zionists aren't welcome here, Jews aren't, they tossed them in the dumpster. And the ones that said we call for intifada, for violence, they tossed those in the dumpster. The ones that said from the river to the sea, calling for the ethnic cleansing of Jews from Israel, they tossed in the dumpster. They went out with just the Free Gaza posters, and they did their rally. But that's a story that tells me that there are administrators that want to do the right thing, and we need to let them know that they have the legal ability
Great point,
and
Jake.
wherewithal.
That's a fantastic point. The reason why these faculty get away with it is because the people like me, not me in particular, but people that are on the conservative side really are either afraid, intimidated, harassed if they do, but they've got to get the spine to stand up. Because I believe that the more students, and I know we're going to hear from Zach here in a minute, the more students at ASU do stand up and get in their face, I think you're going to see a groundswell. Because I don't believe all faculty at ASU is. In fact, I know they're not all like this, and I know good public education teachers that are like that. I know Sonny Borelli's chomping at the bit to speak, but you're exactly right. That's a great point. Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And you actually made my point. There are a lot of people that are outraged over this, but they stay silent because if they speak up, they get targeted. If they're a public official, they speak up, they get targeted by the media and the far left, which is the media is their propaganda machine. And they're always, and of course, the institutions are afraid of doing anything because they're afraid of being sued, because that costs money to fight. And that's unfortunate. That's what they do is like, you don't like it, sue us. And then what they do is, that's called economic lawfare because they economically break you. Thank you. That's it. No more questions.
Yeah, great. I mean, that is very, very true. Any comments over here? Okay. All right, good. Thank you. All right, Mr. Zach,